will have a woman leader, woman secretary next year. So I just want to ask, what do you think? Like, how do you think about the woman movement in United Nations, like feminist movement in United Nations?
Well, I think it's an important movement because it wants to promote women broadly into high positions. Of course, I wouldn't say that it should be a woman without competencies or without knowledge and without ideas, but I do believe that it is high time that women take more prominent positions in political life. On one side, because it gives a strong message to all the women, to young women particularly. We need more role models in this area. And on the other side, because I do believe that it's a matter of having competent women. There are plenty of competent women. And we need a critical mass of women in the different areas of political engagement, economic life, and otherwise in order to reach gender equality. So, in one word, I think it's an important movement. I see many women, also competent women, being part of this race for the post of Secretary General, which is a good sign. And then, of course, we will see. I think the most competent and a person that could unite the support of member states at the end of the day will get it.
So what do you think is the trickiest point for a woman to be a leader in the United Nations?
Well, I think it is trust of member states that women can take difficult jobs, because it is a difficult job. Some call it the most impossible job in the world.
Yes.
It is also to show that women can be strong. Usually when women apply for such jobs, high jobs, they ask usually are they competent and are they strong. I think women can do both. And this is it, to convince that women can be both.
That sounds really good, wonderful. Like, I think that will be very important to have further influence in the world, not only in the US.
Right, yeah. Thank you very much.
Appreciate to have a good interview.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome, everyone. I really appreciate all of you coming out and managing to get through security and all the complications of that. So your fortitude is very appreciated, and thank you so much for being here. But it's a beautiful day, and we have a lovely view of the UN, which is also very exciting. So our purpose of being here is that we have started a campaign to elect a woman UN Secretary General, and we are so excited and so pleased that Irina Bokova is here and has been nominated for Secretary General. It's very, very exciting for the very first time that this has ever happened. I want to thank a few people. We have 3 co-sponsors, as you may see over there, the ACUNS, the Academic Council on the UN System, and it was actually at a conference in Sweden a couple of years ago with ACUNS that another colleague of mine and I sat down for dinner and said, there's got to be a woman UN Secretary General, so let's start the movement. And that's really where the inspiration was. And in the brochures that are over there, it actually does tell that little story about sitting in Sweden, having a beer, and thinking, oh my God, we've got to do this. So ACUNS is one of the sponsors, as well as UNA New York, and Ann Nickel is here. She's the executive director. Say hi. And they've been wonderful about sponsoring things and being a part of this whole campaign. We are the campaign to elect a woman Secretary General, and we started this about a year and a half ago. If you are one of those people who like to tweet as you are in an event, then we highly encourage you to use our Twitter hashtag she, S-H-E, the number 4, SG. And follow us at She4SG. And then also at Irina Bokova. So we would love it if you would be tweeting out as things go and take a picture and tweet it out. That makes it a lot more fun. And people love getting that information. I will be introducing our honored guest and our moderator in just a few minutes. My name is Jean Krasno. I think I forgot to introduce myself. But first I want to just take a couple minutes to explain this incredibly new system of electing a Secretary General that has been launched for this particular time around when Ban Ki-moon steps down. And the General Assembly became very activated over last summer and then into the fall, saying, we as the General Assembly want to have more input in this selection. Up until now, it had always been a secret ballot that was taken within the Security Council, and nobody knew even who they were considering until the last minute when they announced a name and sent it to the General Assembly, and the GA has always said, okay, by consensus, not a roll call vote. And this time around, there's this excitement about becoming more democratic within this very bureaucratic organization. I'm calling it kind of a revolution. And so they said that they wanted a joint letter between the President of the General Assembly and the President of the Security Council saying that this would now be an open process, that countries were encouraged to nominate candidates and particularly to nominate women. And so now that launched the process, and we now have 9 candidates who have stepped forward and been nominated. 4 are women and 5 are men. And they last week were here at the UN having open hearings. This had never happened before. Each one was given 2 hours to make a presentation and then answer questions. And looking around the room, I think every single member state was there. So they are taking this all extremely, extremely seriously. And so we're so pleased with that. And that the women are so outstanding. And we're just really wonderfully pleased. So that explains it a little bit. I think over the summer, the member states and the Security Council will be looking at the names that have been put forward, and then we'll come up with a list. And the rumor is that by October, the final nomination will take place. Let me at this time introduce Irina Bokova. She currently serves as the Director General of the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization we know as UNESCO, which is headquartered in Paris. She was born in Sofia, Bulgaria, and graduated from Moscow State University in International Relations, and studied at the University of Maryland, in Washington, and the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, so highly educated. Irina Bokova is an active member of many international expert networks. She is a president and founding member of the European Policy Forum. For many years, she has worked to overcome European divisions and to foster the values of dialogue, diversity, human dignity, and human rights. As Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova is actively engaged in international efforts to advance quality of education for all. We're here at the Institute for International Education. Gender equality, cultural dialogue, and scientific cooperation for sustainable development, and is leading UNESCO as a global advocate for safety of journalists and the freedom of expressions, all very, very important. I will also introduce Shazia Rafi, who will be the moderator for our discussion later on. And Shazia was appointed in 1996 as Secretary General of Parliamentarians for Global Action, where I worked as a program officer. So I've known Shazia for quite a long time. The first woman to head a global parliamentary body, and the first person from a developing country to do so. She served 6 elected terms during her tenure at PGA and was instrumental in agreement and ratification of 2 treaties, the International Criminal Court, very important, and the Arms Trade Treaty, 2 UN agreements on reproductive health in Cairo, and women's empowerment in Beijing. Shazia has a master's from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy and a bachelor's from Bryn Mawr College. So I welcome them here and ask Ms. Irina Bokova to please come up and greet you.
Well, thank you very much, Jean, for this kind presentation, and of course my first gratitude goes to the co-sponsors of this event, the ACONS, the UNA, New York, and yourself, and also for the opportunity to have this exchange. I was thinking, coming here with all these difficulties of security. I remember I was once at a women's leadership program, and one of the first advice they were giving was, we women always excuse ourselves. So we always say sorry. We come and we say, oh, please excuse me, I'm late, please excuse me for this and for that. So I was coming here and I started with this, I'm so sorry that there's this security around and people don't come. And then I caught myself and said, why should I say always I'm sorry? I should not say it. So I don't start with this, I'm sorry, but I really apologize for the inconvenience. So we women apologize constantly, so we stop apologizing. This was my first message. But of course, let me say that being here in the International Institute of Education, feel very much at home, because I have been dealing for the last 7 years and even more, every single day with education and with women and with gender, and I think this is so important. So I thought this is really the right venue to talk about United Nations, what United Nations is giving to the world, and what we can do also for girls, for women, which should start with education and then move all the cycle of empowerment of women. But before moving to these thoughts that I would like to share with you, I was just thinking also that, Jean, you just said that there are 9 candidates and 4 women, and I was going back to my own personal story. In 2009 I was elected as Director General of UNESCO. Precisely, there were 9 candidates, 4 women. It's a good omen. If others do not get into the race, of course, it's still, everything is open. But let me just say that as you mentioned, I come from Bulgaria. I do not want to repeat everything that I said during the informal dialogues, and I was just thinking, which one is more important, the informal dialogue at the United Nations or our meeting here? Because this is where I think interaction with civil society, with the more open, transparent process, everything that the President of the General Assembly and at that time the President of the Security Council, by sending this letter to Member States and by the adoption of the respective resolution of the General Assembly, was so important to open the process and to have a more transparency and more interaction between the people in this world, the civil society, and everybody that is interested in the United Nations, and of course the candidates. So I really believe this is a great opportunity. It's a very important process, and I feel a sense of responsibility participating in this process, because it is not just convincing governments that you can do the job, but you have to interact with different constituencies, with people that are interested, and I think having the support also of the civil society groups is very important. And what you are doing, promoting also women candidates, equally, I think, is vital for this new process. Now, a little bit of maybe personal word about myself, and I think it is important that you all know where the candidates come from, what background, the countries, professional and personal experiences and ideas. And mine is a story of Eastern Europe, like most of the candidates that are now Eastern Europe, that has been for more than almost 50 years, 45 years after the end of the Second World War, was on the other side of the Iron Curtain. And I think I'm lucky that I'm from this generation which was given the chance to overcome this division of Europe, to overcome the Cold War and moving into a very different, I would say, state of rebuilding countries, of rebuilding societies based on values of openness, of democracy, of human rights, of human dignity. And I think this is very important because I believe what East Europeans we can bring to the world now that there is a quest for peace, for sustainable development, for human dignity. With the Agenda 2030 and with so many processes of transition in countries, post-conflict countries and others that move towards transformation of societies, we think that Agenda 2030 is deeply transformational agenda. I think East Europeans, we can bring a lot of ideas, experiences from us, from our own backgrounds, and that is why I think that being from Bulgaria, a country that was part of this process, is something that should be emphasized. And then, very early on, I was familiar with the gender issue. I was lucky that when I went and I became a young diplomat in the foreign ministry, I was entrusted with the questions of gender, of women's affairs, and I could go attend the conferences in Copenhagen, Nairobi, the beginning, and then of course much later with Beijing. And this opened for me a totally new kind of a world, a totally new space and vision about why these issues are important and how we should really look at them in a much more profound manner than I thought previously. And this has left a very strong imprint and impact on my own understanding about the world and about society and about equality in a society until this very day. And I think this has given me also a lot of strength and ideas of how further on in my work to tackle these issues. And being also the first Secretary of the Bulgarian government for European integration, something that for Eastern Europe was extremely important, and for us to join Europe, to join the European Union, I started practically all the framework of relations with the European Union, joint committees, joint working groups, everything. We prepared thousands of pages of government proposals for changing of legislation, strengthening institutions, anything that was bringing us closer to European Union was something at that moment, I think, vital. And of course, this opened for me personally the possibility of integrating a Ford Foundation program, which was practically the year of the change, 89, when I spent 10 months at the University of Maryland School of Public Affairs, which I visited just last month. They invited me for a lecture. It was a very kind invitation of them to talk about culture and conflict, to talk about rising extremism as how we tackle all these issues. And of course, it added to my understanding. And then I was elected in Parliament. I was elected twice to the Bulgarian Parliament, serving in the Commission on Human Rights. Then I did organize the first ever conference at the Bulgarian Parliament already in 1991 on the European Convention on Human Rights and how we integrate these issues into the Bulgarian Constitution that was adopted in 91. And then, of course, it was the parliamentarian work in the Commission on Foreign Policy. Then I was sent to become the Bulgarian ambassador to France and serving also as a representative of the President of Bulgaria to the International Organization of Francophone Countries, which gave a very particular also sensitivity about diversity, linguistic, cultural and otherwise. And here I am in my 7th year as Director General of UNESCO. Now I think, and I'm not going to speak a lot about this, but I do believe that being twice elected as Director General of UNESCO in a very competitive, both times I was elected in a competitive procedures, gave me an insight also of how these processes go. And sometimes looking at the transparency here of the process, I'm thinking that if it was not for this process in 2009, probably I wouldn't have been in this post, because I had to convince governments and countries to support, albeit they were very powerful and strong candidates that were standing in this race. And I'm proud also that there were very strong women in this race. I think it was important that women participated. We compete also with each other, so that when one is elected, we don't say, oh, she's elected because she's a woman, or we say that, you know, they cannot be elected because they're not competent. And what I have tried to do after my election, one of my first ambitions was to make this organization more gender balanced. For the first time, I appointed my team of assistant director generals, half women, half men. Before that, it was only one woman in these positions. And then I started to build strongly into the levels of directors and others, so that we could balance the organization. And as long as gender equality is a very strong part of UNESCO, it is our, as we said, horizontal priority. I have made a big push to streamline all of our activity, to look at everything that we do in education, because UNESCO is about international cooperation in education, in the sciences, in culture and communication, and to introduce many new elements in our work. If, for example, in education it is more kind of understandable that, of course, we have to push for girls, we have to look at enrollment in schools, still I think there was not sufficient understanding and not sufficient push for a holistic approach to what education can give to girls and to women. And now we have a much broader approach after the adoption of the Agenda 2030 with the SDG number 4, which is led by UNESCO. We have a much broader approach of what should be done in order to leverage, I would say, the education for all the other SDGs. I'm speaking about health, I'm speaking about early marriages, I'm speaking about pregnancies early, I'm speaking about violence against women and all the other related issues. But also, for the first time, we have presented 2 years ago a special chapter. For example, UNESCO is leading the World Water Reports. We have made a special chapter on women and water. We have done a very special chapter in our report on global media trends for women journalists. And when we have proposed the Plan of Action of the United Nations for the Safety of Journalists, once again, we made a special emphasis on the harassment and everything that women journalists confront in their work. I'm just mentioning this not to speak about women in sciences with the support of women scientists and so many other activities, STEM and girls, women and creative industries. I think all of this is important if we really want to leverage everything that we can do in order to support women, because gender equality is not just about advocacy. It is very important and we have to continue it, but we have to go deep and to see where we can make the difference and what types of action to take. Now, of course, I know that the post of Secretary General is much more than that. If UNESCO is the soft power of the United Nations, because we are the agency with the broadest, I would say, mandate, not the richest, it should not, we are rich in ideas, which is also good, because somebody said that nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I deeply believe in this. I believe in the power of ideas, I believe in the power of words, I believe in the power of convictions that can change the world, and this is where the soft power of the United Nations is so important. Now that we are discussing the role of the Secretary General, as somebody said, the most impossible job in the world, or there was another article who said only optimists should apply for this job. So maybe I'm both, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of where to place myself into all this. But I'm deeply, as long as I'm very deeply convinced and a deep believer in multilateralism, and maybe UNESCO, my work at UNESCO also has made me even more convinced about this incredibly diverse world that we're living in, with the huge potential that we have of new technologies, of globalization, of everything that binds us together, and at the same time, unfortunately, this fragmentation and the rise of extremism, intolerance, xenophobia in many societies, in many parts, and I do believe that the United Nations is not only indispensable, but this is the only way of dealing with problems in the world. So when we speak that there are challenges and criticism that maybe the UN should do this, why didn't the UN did not do this and that, I think we should always consider that without the UN nowadays we cannot just tackle this world. And it is not that we need less UN because of the challenges, but it is just on the contrary. We need more UN, we need more diplomacy, we need more dialogue, we need more negotiations. And this huge convening power of the United Nations, I believe, is unmatched. And just today, because over there in this new renovated building, there was, and still tomorrow will be the very important ceremony of the Paris Climate Accord. And there was a lot of talk today about SDGs and partnerships, and I was looking at the hall, and then there was a lunch discussion with the private sector, with the civil society, with governments, with the UN. I think this is unmatched in the contemporary political life, because there may be much richer foundations and private sector or NGOs and others, but only the UN can convene around shared values, around shared mission, and I think this is extremely important now that we have to implement Agenda 2030 and of course the Paris Climate Agreement. And not to speak about the important work which is in the area of prevention of conflict, of risk reduction, of resilient societies. I think this is very important. But I'm not dwelling more than that, because I think we have to enter more into a dialogue. I just wanted once again to thank Jean and Shazia. I'm in your hands.